Good luck.
Thanks very much, Arthur. It's lovely to be here this afternoon or this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm just going to share my screen, and then if we introduce ourselves. So yeah, hopefully you can see that. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Lynda Dunlop. I'm a white woman with grey hair, wearing a black jumper, and I'm a member of the science education group at the University of York. Lizzie, would you like to jump in and say hello?
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Arthur, for that lovely welcome. And it's a real privilege to be the first speakers at this really exciting 2 days. My name is Lizzie Rushton. I'm a dear colleague of Arthur's at King's College London, and I'm a lecturer in geography education. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you.
So the guiding question that we're going to be talking to this afternoon is, how can we co-create futures in education for environmental sustainability with teachers and young people? And we're going to outline the approach that we've taken and also tell you a little bit about what young people and teachers have said about education for environmental sustainability. There are some words in Portuguese. I'd like to apologise at the beginning for any errors in those words. So the work that we're going to talk about would not have been possible without a large group of people. So over 200 teachers, teacher educators and young people who participated in workshops, a group of provocateurs who were researchers, teachers, practitioners in education for environmental sustainability, who provided stimulus material in advance of workshops with teachers, young people, and also a wider research commission, including experts like Jane Essex from the University of Strathclyde, who has expertise in working with young people with additional learning needs, Judy Ling Wong of the Black Environment Network, Jackie Airy, Andrea Bullivant from Liverpool World Centre, Amanda Smith from the Centre for Alternative Technology, Cyrus Naeri from Roots, who hosted the provocations that people provided in advance, and Michelle Ryan from the Association for Science Education, who helped with networking across the UK. And finally, Maisie Summer, Laura Price, who facilitated the visualization workshops. And you're going to see some beautiful images that Maisie has created using the ideas from teachers and young people throughout. So just at the start, we'd like to invite you to reflect on the future of education for environmental sustainability that you would like to see. So I'm just going to give you a minute to think. I'll try and provide some beautiful sounds. And if you can just post them right in the chat, but don't press enter until I say go. So yeah, what is the future for education for environmental sustainability that you would like to see? So hopefully, oh no, that's not the right music. I'll just give a minute or so. We have some nature sounds now.
Lynda, don't
can feel like a very long time. So if you've had a chance to write the future for education for environmental sustainability that you would like to see, and press enter now. We're not going to spend a lot of time at the moment looking at the contributions, but if we can return to these perhaps in the time for questions afterwards. Thank you very much. I can see quite a few people have contributed ideas into the chat. And so we've got idea of ethics and values coming out, a world of peace, collaboration. So I think you'll see some of these themes coming up in the ideas from teachers and young people that Lizzie will share in a little while. So our work was in the UK context, and education for environmental sustainability is different in different parts of the UK. And if we just look at England, research has identified absences, obstructions, and diminishment in relation to education for environmental sustainability, with no overall strategy for the country. But in saying that, young people have called for climate education through movements such as Teach the Future and the School Strikes for Climate, and teachers are supportive of climate education that is action-oriented. And in the absence of strong leadership and direction from governments, we wanted to know in our research what young people and teachers thought that education for environmental sustainability should look like. So the way that we went about this was through futures and visualization workshop. So we have involved young people and teachers in phases of critique to identify flaws in existing ways of doing things, ways in stages of fantasy where we've invited them to think creatively about the best way to solve problems, and also in phases of implementation where we ask them to think about how to transform their ideas into change. So the questions that we've asked in this process of making a manifesto together are, where are we now? So where is education for environmental sustainability in the UK now? Where do we need to be? And what are the barriers to getting there? So in a moment, Lizzie's going to share our process and what the teachers and young people said. But first of all, we're just going to show you a short video that highlights some of the key features of the process. So hopefully you can see this and hear it okay. Over to Lizzie now to tell you a little bit more about the process and what teachers and young people said.
Thank you so much, Lynda. So yeah, I'm just going to give a little bit of a sense of the journey that we have been on with this project. So prior to the series of workshops that we held to work with teachers and young people from across the UK, we gathered the provocations that Lynda has mentioned, which provided stimulus material for the workshops. And those provocations included short pieces of text, video, that speak to a range of themes, including the theme of young leaders for collective action for the climate, intergenerational conversations about the climate, and local global bridges to an interconnected world, as well as perspectives from research practitioners and teachers. And we're really pleased to be able to share one of these short provocations from, I'm sure you'll agree, a super inspiring youth climate activist called Molly Hucker, who is from South Wales in the UK. And so we'll just hear briefly from Molly now.
Hello, my name is Molly. I'm a climate activist from South Wales. I think schools could be a massive solution to the climate emergency. Hopefully, I'm about to show you why. So, currently in schools, we see climate change and global warming being taught in science and geography. But by confining the climate emergency to these two subjects, we sort of portrayed the climate emergency as like a distant threat. We need to worry about that. Whereas a cross-curriculum approach could really be a solution and help convey how the climate emergency really transcends every aspect of our lives. This could be done through having discussions in almost every subject. For example, in sociology, you could talk about climate justice. In ICT and DT, we could have discussions on green technologies. But it doesn't stop there. We also need to take the climate emergency outside of the classroom too, with an entire school approach to teaching and raising awareness of the climate emergency. Canteens could boast a plant-based menu, raising awareness of the detrimental environmental impacts of meat consumption. Schools should include local green spaces, for example, even having their own allotments. Not only teaching the worth of local produce and growing our own food and sustainability of food production, but also helping fight holiday hunger and connect the school community firsthand to the nature that is so worth protecting. We know that green spaces can have positive mental health impacts, for example, reducing stress. And we all know how stressful schools can be. We can also seek to locate schools on green pathways, for example, cycle routes, easy accessible by foot, reducing the need to congest the roads with cars to get to and from schools, making our roads safer around schools as well. Schools could be thinking about how their carbon footprint is contributed through uniforms. What is the process of the school uniform? How ethical is it? How water intensive was the production? Schools could advocate for the recycling of school uniforms from year group to year group, passing school uniforms down, saving and reducing the school's carbon footprint. Schools really do have the opportunity to take an entire school approach to tackling the climate emergency, instilling the climate conscious habits, teaching the climate emergency in a way that isn't scary or overwhelming, but honest and conveys the severity of the problem, but justifies this by saying what we can do to combat the climate emergency. Thank you.
So I think it's hard not to be inspired by Molly there, and we have Molly's provocation and a whole range of other provocations available on the Roots website, which are all free to read, watch and engage with. And so here it is, the Manifesto for Education for Environmental Sustainability, which again is free to download from a link there, or you can capture on the QR code, free to read and use. And yeah, it's a complete joy to be able to share that with you and hear your responses to that. So we're going to look at different levels. The manifesto, the young people and teachers spoke about the changes that they wanted to see at different levels, and we're going to start with the policy level. And as we, sorry, Lynda, sorry, you can go back one. As we do that, as we walk through these, I just invite you to consider some of these questions and perhaps some others that you might have yourself. So do you share these visions? Are there aspects that you would particularly amplify, other things that perhaps are not so visible in this manifesto that relate to your context? What are the barriers that you see, and how might we overcome these together? And so, yeah, we'll start with the policy level. So at the policy level, I'm thinking again back to the UK context, we're calling for a coordinated review of curricula, which actually involves teachers and young people across the UK. And the aim of that is to identify and foreground ways to value sustainability regardless of the subjects that students elect to study. As Molly suggested there in her provocation, in the UK, particularly in England, if you only study, you only get to study sustainability after a certain age if you study science and geography. So there is a huge proportion of young people that don't have access to sustainability education. Students and teachers would like to work with policymakers to identify ways that sustainability can feature in existing accountability regimes. They would like to see policies which focus on valuing the collective, equitable action and positive problem solving. And across all levels, including the policy level, but also the community, school and classroom levels, which I'll explore in a moment, the importance of starting young with sustainability was recognised. As one of our participants put it, you need to start young and keep going. And so at the community level, environmental sustainability and education for that was seen very much as a community endeavour by teachers and young people. They called for a no-cost, accredited award for teachers and students, which has an environmental sustainability focus. Both teachers and young people highlighted the value of the collective and how this develops over time. During the workshops with our artist Maisie, this idea was visualised through the example of the acorn, which grows into a sapling and a mature oak tree, and eventually into a forest, a community of sustainability, if you will. Youth and teachers want to see a sustainability curriculum for groups and parents involved in education, and they want opportunities to identify and value sustainability education undertaken from the very earliest years onwards, building on this work through community partnerships in both formal and informal settings. Teachers and young people want to see greater awareness of the value of schools as local hubs for sustainability, where people from across the community can take part in and lead education and activities and build their networks. And this sense of the school as the community sustainability hub is beautifully captured in this illustration, with shared opportunities to work and learn and live sustainably. At the school level, there are a range of key ideas, and we'll just pick out some of those. One was around, again, this idea of reviewing, identifying the ways that sustainability can feature in existing policy, in existing contracts. For example, in the UK, the idea of a school improvement plan or a transport plan, and contracts around waste and recycling. Voice was really important, so placing student voice and agency at the core of the school sustainability work, so that students can learn how schools work and take action. This could be through student councils and elected green teams. Another key idea was that of choice, making the sustainable choice the convenient choice, for example, in school grounds, in cafeterias and classrooms, to making it easy, visible, straightforward for people to live and work sustainably. Leadership was also a theme that came out at the school level, appointing perhaps a sustainability lead that who would coordinate action on sustainability across the different areas of school life. And as Molly has so beautifully highlighted, valuing the health-related aspects of sustainability, promoting healthy diets and environments as one approach to tackle eco-anxiety. So that could include the indoor and outdoor learning spaces in schools and would involve work with cafeteria and ground staff. Teachers and young people called for the link between the quality of the school environment and mental and physical health to be acknowledged and nurtured. And we see this here in the illustration of a green school environment, and with, for example, sustainable energy and transport options. And then at the classroom level, there were ideas of growth, providing teachers with the time and resources to engage in sustainability-focused professional development, to grow their confidence, to incorporate sustainability within their teaching, regardless of the subject. Giving students space and time to learn about climate change and environmental sustainability that was not linked to assessment, and that could be achieved through research projects and developing youth activism. Young people and teachers wanted more support for teachers of all subjects, so that all young people and teachers could engage in sustainability. And we see this here in the image of the sustainability classroom, with views across to the school allotment and greenhouse, and opportunities for students to work together to make sustainable choices. And I'll just finish by drawing together 4 of the key themes that were visible in the manifesto, regardless of the age of the students and the subject specialism. So one theme was around the use of outdoor spaces, using outdoor spaces for learning and community projects to enrich school buildings and sites. Outdoor spaces were seen as providing vital opportunities for young people and teachers to be in nature, to really connect with nature. Another key theme was that of authentic research, so providing opportunities for young people to engage with scientists and researchers based in industry and universities to learn about and contribute to our understanding of climate change. Another theme was around discussion and dialogue, particularly valuable opportunities for intergenerational dialogue. As we know, environmental sustainability and climate change has temporal and spatial complexity. So these spaces for intergenerational conversations are crucial when thinking about ideas of responsibility, equity, and fairness. And finally, perhaps unsurprisingly, as this was very much a co-created project, co-creation was a theme, working with different groups within and beyond schools who bring different perspectives and contexts. And really importantly, where difference is valued as a resource and not a barrier to be overcome. And the opportunity to create a tangible manifesto was identified as important with those people involved in the project. And so on our final slide, we leave you with a question, and thank you so much for the reminder. Maybe we'll keep up, we'll close the gap a little bit, Arthur, but we leave you with this question, a big question. How do you co-create sustainable futures with young people through education? And really excited to hear your comments and questions, and thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Lizzie and Lynda. That's fascinating how much you guys managed to do in such a, I would say, short period of time when people start talking about climate change and you create this manifesto. The first thing I was thinking is, do you think it would be useful? I mean, your manifesto, is it very much UK focused, or I was wondering whether we could perhaps translate that into Portuguese if you agreed, obviously, and have that also distributed in the Lusophonic world. I mean, maybe I will leave that with you to think about.
It'd be super interesting to see how these ideas, which are very much located in the global north, and we absolutely acknowledge that that is a feature of, it was the British Research Commission, so it had to have that geographical focus, but it would be amazing to see how the work could be challenged, grown, developed with perspectives from other regions of the world. I'd hope that there were some areas of kind of sympathy and empathy, but I imagine there'll be other perspectives that we would really benefit from hearing from. But yeah, I think one of the ideas of the manifesto is to provide a starting point, some inspiration for young people in their own context and teachers in their own context to have those conversations. Great,
thank you very much. Well, just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions to ask, please type in our chat. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's in English or in Portuguese, because I can translate into English if necessary. Jennifer is saying, please may I go to D school? Jennifer Rudd. So I would like to ask a question to the two of you. I mean, you talked about action from teachers and students in particular about climate change and caring about the environment. But do you see the distinction between these and activism? I'm thinking about people like Greta Thunberg, who became like a superstar in defense of, against climate change, all the publicity that she's got. And how do you see, I mean, do you see out of this initiative students going on to be activists, like something similar to what Greta does, or do you think it's fine just to carry on doing something more more subtle, more locally, but still having some impact on what people do and how they engage with this serious issue? How do you see these, the consequences of these education that you guys are advocating?
Maybe if I start, Lynda, and then do feel free to. I think I would understand activism as a form of action, And I would want to see action being really multifaceted, so that each young person, each teacher can respond and contribute in the way that they feel able. Some people will be very able to stand up in front of, you know, a huge group of adults and politicians and be able to be as eloquent and phenomenal as Greta and her colleagues are. Other people won't, for you know, won't feel that that's their particular role. And I think, you know, if Greta is the standard to which we're all held, then we're all going to fall short. She is such an inspiration, and I feel like I don't do enough compared to the kind of action she does. So I wouldn't want to say to young people, like, we all have to be Greta. Greta is phenomenal, but there are other ways to be Greta in our own lives, in our own context. And particularly in England, you know, activism is a really tricky area for teachers. You know, we're not allowed to, you know, we are constrained in the way that we can encourage and support young people. So I think it's about encouraging them to take action in their own lives, in their own communities, in the way that they feel able to make that change, but just giving them maybe some inspiration and space to do that. But Lynda, maybe you want to say something else?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking of rather than thinking about activism, thinking about different ways to participate in decision making. So the sorts of things that the young people were given examples of in workshops were things like signing petitions, writing to local MP, forming local groups, being involved in a school improvement project. So people were talking about different scales and different levels. Some people preferred writing, some speaking. So there were lots of ways of kind of, yeah, broadening the conversation and being involved without having to give it a label that some people might want to shy away from, I think.
Great, wonderful, thank you. I've got a question from Jennifer. I don't know if you can read the chat. I will read out so that translators can translate into Portuguese anyway, okay? So she says, it's a serious question. How did you get so many teachers to engage? For my own project, one of the biggest challenges has been building these relationships with teachers to get them to engage with climate change education.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's the same for teachers across the world. Teachers in the UK have very little time, are under a huge amount of pressure, and yeah, we're really grateful to those teachers. I think it takes time, and Lynda and I are very fortunate that we've had careers in education. We've both been teachers ourselves, so we're able to draw on those networks, although the manifesto didn't take a huge amount of time to produce. The kind of work before that all built towards that. So I'm afraid I don't have a kind of an easy answer, but I think then partnering with other organisations is the other way. So we never would have been able to work with so many young people with additional learning needs had we not had our key partners in that area, for example, because again, that's a level of trust that those teachers have to have in you as a researcher to enable you to work with their young people. So yeah, no easy answer, I'm afraid.
Fabulous. I have a question from Catherine Naston. Catherine, great to see you here. She says, thanks Lizzie and Lynda, fascinating. I'm curious about how you feel the visual arts contributed to the young people's work, especially given your point that sustainability is often siloed within geography and science.
Do you want me to go, Lynda? Like, I feel like I'm just jumping. Okay. That's a really good question. And actually, Lynda and I were reflecting today that even though the workshops with the artists were obviously very much framed about creating spaces for images and encouraging people to share, like, for example, adding to a Miro or a Padlet, the images that represented ideas for sustainability, people were still quite attached to text. So I think for me, working with Maisie helped me think a little bit differently. It helped bring a bit of a structure to the idea of imagining the future. I think if you do that only with words, for me anyway, that was quite difficult. But if I could kind of, even though not very skillfully, draw the kind of school site that I felt like I wanted to be a part of, that was another way of bringing out those ideas. And also just makes you think differently. Working with artists, they they bring a whole new perspective, and not being kind of particularly artistic myself, I was very alive to that as a pedagogical tool. Lynda, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the other place where there was a lot of meaning conveyed in the images was in responses from young people in special schools, so schools for young people with additional learning needs, and they contributed some of their responses as images. So we had students drawing timelines of like the earth now, or education for environmental sustainability now, then into the future. Others created futuristic visions. So that's another way in which art, I think, gave a new dimension or a different perspective on the questions that we were asking.
Wonderful. Arthur, do I have time just to pick up the question about like resources between the UK and Brazil, and talking with students with and kind of this point about how do we make bigger impact? Actually, young people were absolutely clear that anger maybe is too strong, but they felt very frustrated that it was down to the individual enthusiastic teacher in their school for this sustainability work to happen, and they were very much wanting governments and to listen, and that's why we framed it in a manifesto. It's a document that's supposed to speak to government. It's not supposed to only say to certain people you've got to make individual changes. So I'm really alive to that. I hope that sort of makes some sort of response to that. But yeah, it's absolutely not about the tiny changes are to encourage. How can we then push up? Right, it's not the individual. Government's got to do their part too.
Great, Lizzie and Lynda. I've got two questions that they are linked, and I can see that one comes from Fabiana Soares, the other one comes from Danilo Cato, who's presenting tomorrow, and the two of them are very interested in your manifesto. But Fabiana asks, have you considered the challenge of bringing education to sustainability to the poorest countries? I believe there is like a concern here about whether this sustainability and I mean whether these are issues that should be addressed locally or globally. So, and then Danilo also asked, as a manifesto of the Global North, what aspects are considered in relation to the so-called developing countries or to people's, I'm going to translate that, who lost their territories because of hegemonic domination from some nation states onto others. That's how I translated, Danilo. I hope that makes sense. If that makes sense, it's a difficult question, but all about whether I suppose, how I interpret two questions is all about whether the message that's communicating in the Global North, do you think could be used, translated straight into the Global South, or we need some rewarding and readaptation and adaptations to different contexts?
So forgive me if I haven't quite grasped the question, but I think I'm there. I think I don't think the people and teachers involved from our project would ever want to say that this can just be taken and moved globally, right? This is a particular manifesto for a particular context. The young people, although we haven't picked out every aspect and example, they were very alive to the lack of education that they perhaps had in relation to issues of decolonising and equity in that regard. So I think it's about providing an example, a process for other contexts to then say, well, actually, we would go about it this way, and we have these particular knowledges and values that we would want to bring to it, and educate back, right? Like, tell us in the Global North different ways of bringing different knowledges and structures to play. It's maybe it's like a mega provocation, and it's a manifesto. It's a call from a particular group of people. It doesn't seek to represent even everyone in the UK, right? So yeah, absolutely alive to that. Lynda, did you want to add anything?
I was just thinking of some of the conversations during the workshops where teachers were challenging extractivism, racial capitalism, all of those sorts of ideas. But I guess the manifesto was directed at governments within the UK, speaking to the situation in different parts of the UK. So it was even like, I guess, one level down from the UK. So yeah, I don't think we'd want to say that this is an idea that should be adopted for any context. I think maybe the more interesting thing is how to go about co-creating the ideas with young people in the context that you're in, whether that's a classroom, a school, or at a national level. Yeah.
Great. I realize it was a very difficult question indeed. How can you really, you know, particularly without knowing all the contexts that are around the globe or in Brazil. So wonderful. I had a few more questions, but we need to move on, unfortunately. They're great questions. These are great questions. But perhaps we can pick them up later on too and link to other presentations, okay? Reminding that Sandra, Alessandra, Danilo, and all the panelists, Sufyan, Fernando, please feel free to ask questions to, and Lizzie and Lynda, I know you'll be around, so to make comments and ask questions too, okay? So we can bring all of these presentations together, all right? Thank you very much indeed, it was great. It was great that we had more than 20 minutes from you, so we could learn a lot from your work. Fabulous, thank you. Shall we call the next presenters then?